Have you ever felt like the more you gave, the more invisible you became? Like your value was only measured by how much you could sacrifice, and the moment you stopped giving, you stopped mattering. I used to think love meant giving without keeping. Score. That if I worked hard, stayed quiet, and helped where needed, I'd be seen, appreciated, maybe even loved a little more. But I was wrong. It took me years, and nearly every dollar in my savings, to understand that unconditional loyalty can become a trap. That sometimes the people closest to you aren't asking for help. They're expecting you to bleed. 6 months ago, I walked out of my parents' house in silence. No screaming, no accusations, no dramatic goodbye. Just a quiet decision that I couldn't live like that anymore. Since then, they've called me selfish, cold, heartless. They say I've turned my back on family. But the truth is, I was never allowed to face forward in the first place. I was the one they leaned on, guilted, and drained, until I had nothing left for myself. My name is Olivia Chen, and this is the story of how I paid to save my family's home, only to be told I was never welcome back. I didn't grow up in a broken home, at least not in the way most people define it. From the outside, everything looked functional. My dad, Richard Chen, ran a small HVAC repair business. My mom, Evelyn, worked part-time as a nurse's assistant. And my younger sister, Lily, was the family's spark, always praised for her creativity and charm. We lived in a modest townhouse on the south side of Chicago, where birthdays were celebrated with store-bought cakes and bills were often paid just in time. But what no one saw, what even I couldn't name until years later, was the quiet imbalance running through everything. While Lily's setbacks were framed as opportunities for growth, mine were treated as warnings, disappointments, even burdens. When Lily failed 2 college classes, my mom said, "She's just figuring out her path." When I got a B+ in calculus, my dad asked, "What happened?" I learned early on that my role wasn't to shine, it was to stabilize. At 15, I got my first job wiping down tables at a PHO restaurant after school. By 17, I was working weekends too, saving every dollar for books, tuition, and eventually rent. No one told me I had to. I just understood. If I didn't carry the weight, things would fall apart. I was the one who made sure the power didn't get shut off when Mom forgot the due date. I covered Lily's summer class fees without saying a word. I even bought groceries when Dad's business hit a slow season. At first, it felt noble, like I was doing what any good daughter should. But as the years passed, something in me began to tire. I still remember the afternoon Lily came home with a new tablet. She had just dropped out of her art program and, instead of talking about her next step, Mom had proudly shown me the receipt. "She needs it to keep creating," she'd said, as if failure was just a stepping stone she could decorate with digital sketches. Meanwhile, my laptop, bought secondhand, was missing 2 keys. I'd patched it with tape and typed around the gaps. No one ever asked if I needed an upgrade. At the time, I didn't complain. I swallowed it like I always did. But inside, resentment was slowly layering itself, thin, almost invisible, until it formed a weight I couldn't name. I became the family's unofficial financial backup. When the fridge broke, I helped cover repairs. When Dad's van needed new tires, I offered to contribute, not because they asked, but because they hesitated just long enough for me to jump in. That hesitation was the trick. It gave me a choice I never really had. They started calling me our rock. But even rocks crack under pressure, and the more I did, the more they expected. "You're so responsible, Olivia," they'd say. But no one asked what it cost me to be that way. I wasn't building a life. I was managing theirs. While Lily tried, quit, and restarted different creative pursuits, I was holding down a full-time job, saving for a down payment, budgeting medical costs, and pretending I was fine. Looking back, I don't think they ever meant to be cruel. But I was never seen as someone who could break. I was the steady one, the safe one. And safety, in my family, meant you didn't get to say no. That was the start of everything. Me becoming useful, reliable, indispensable, and eventually, invisible. It wasn't one moment that opened my eyes. It was dozens of small ones, unremarkable on their own, but together they formed a pattern too loud to ignore. Like the night Lily borrowed my car and returned it with the gaslight blinking and crumbs all over the seats. When I asked her to please fill the tank next time, she rolled her eyes and said, "It's just gas, Liv. Don't be so uptight." My parents heard the exchange and stayed quiet, as if the comment didn't deserve a response. Or maybe to them it didn't. Because that's how things had always been. Lily was the free spirit, sensitive, misunderstood, in need of space and support. I was the structured one, the capable one, the one who didn't need anything. So, when I did express a need, even a small one, it came across as selfish or dramatic. There was the time I got a promotion at work, project lead on a city infrastructure redesign. I brought home the news thinking maybe this time they'd be proud. Mom glanced up from the TV and said, "That's great, sweetie, but will it make you too busy to help your dad with the tax stuff this weekend?" And Dad chimed in, We're hoping you'd take a look at Lily's student loans too." Just like that, my achievement became a task list. There was no celebration, no dinner out, not even a moment to ask how I felt about stepping into a leadership role. I had to swallow my excitement because there was simply no space for it in the house. But nothing stung more than the birthday weekend. I had just turned 29. I didn't expect anything grand, just a dinner, maybe a cake. Instead, I came home to find the kitchen decorated with balloons, cupcakes on the table, and music playing. My heart lifted until I saw Lily's name on the cake. "What's going on?" I asked. Mom smiled. "We decided to celebrate Lily's new Etsy shop launch. She's finally doing what she loves." My birthday was never mentioned, not once. I stood there with a bottle of wine I'd picked up on the way, still wearing my work heels, surrounded by people who had forgotten I existed as anything other than a support system. I realized then that I could win awards, pay their bills, save their home, and still be secondary to Lily's next creative phase. That's when the ache inside me became something sharper. Not just resentment, but clarity. My worth in that family was measured by how quietly I gave, how little space I took up. Lily could stumble, fall, and be met with cushions. I could run marathons and still be met with silence. And what's worse, I had enabled it. I had absorbed their needs until I couldn't even recognize my own. The final blow came one Sunday night when I got home late from a stormy site inspection. Exhausted and soaked, I opened my inbox to see an email from Dad titled "Quick Favor." Inside, a list. Lily needed $350 for new supplies, the internet. Bill was overdue, and Mom had a dental appointment that insurance wouldn't cover. The tone was polite, but expectant. No question marks, no "if you're able." Just bullet points, like I was a department head approving expenses. That email sat with me for days. It wasn't the money, it was the assumption that I would handle it again without protest, that my life was flexible, available, and secondary. It was in that quiet, bitter week that I finally began to plan something I had never dared before: boundaries. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood that fairness doesn't happen unless you create it. I had spent my whole life keeping things together, but for once, I wanted to know what would happen if I just stopped. It started, like most traps do, with good intentions and a tight deadline. My parents called me late one evening, voices low and tense. "Liv," Dad began, "we're in a situation with the mortgage." I was still at the office, eating takeout at my desk, half listening until I heard the word foreclosure. My spine stiffened. He said the bank had given them 60 days, that if they didn't start making minimum payments immediately, the house would be at risk. We just need a little help, he added. A few months, just until we catch our breath. I asked how much. He paused, then said, about $1,200 a month, 6 months tops. I didn't even think. I told them yes before I'd finished my food. I had money set aside for a down payment. My dream condo in Uptown, close to the lake and walking distance. From work. I'd been saving for 4 years. I told myself I could delay it. Just for 6 months. They were my parents. What else could I say? That first transfer went out the same night. I even set up autopay to make sure I didn't forget. I sent the receipts to Dad, who replied with a short, "Got it." No thank you, no acknowledgement. I told myself it was stress. I told myself not to expect gratitude. After all, I wasn't doing this for praise. I was doing it because I loved them. But 6 months passed, and there was no mention of stopping. No sign they were catching their breath. In fact, I started getting more requests. Lily's car broke down. Mom needs a new prescription not covered by insurance. The furnace is acting up. All urgent, all phrased like I was the only possible solution. I adjusted my budget, cut my gym membership, stopped ordering lunch, told myself this was temporary. But then month 8 rolled around. Then 12, then 17. I had sent over $21,000 in less than 2 years. I didn't notice the total at first because the payments were monthly, spaced out, easier to ignore. But when I finally sat down and added it up, the number hit me like a slap. That was the down payment. That was my future. Gone. What made it worse was how normal it all became. They no longer asked, they informed. This week, can you also cover Lily's art supplies? Don't forget the roof repair estimates coming. There was no shame in their voices, just the usual calm expectation that I'd take care of it. I became their safety net, their silent donor, their default. I still lived in the same rental apartment with the peeling bathroom ceiling and unreliable heating. I ate microwave dinners, skipped outings with friends, declined conferences that required travel. Meanwhile, Lily was posting pictures from weekend retreats, brunches with friends, and captioning them healing vibes. She'd started an online art shop that barely sold anything, but it didn't matter, because her bills were covered. At first, I felt guilty for even noticing. Wasn't it my choice to help? Didn't I say yes? But slowly, something inside me began to shift. I started waking up anxious, checking my balance before buying groceries. I began lying when my parents called, saying I had meetings or was on site, just to avoid more updates. I avoided opening my banking app in the morning, afraid of what I'd see. One day, I found myself standing in the grocery store, calculating whether I could afford a gallon of almond milk and still have enough for Lily's tablet repair. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. Not just the numbers, but the truth. This wasn't support. This wasn't generosity. This was a system. A quiet, invisible machine that ran on my sacrifice. And if I didn't shut it off, it would bleed me dry. I made the decision on a Tuesday. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no tears. Just a quiet, irreversible resolve that settled into my chest like cold steel. I told myself I'd do one last thing, bring groceries, check in, say what I needed to say, and then I'd be done. That Saturday, I woke up early and drove across the city with 2 bags of food, a bottle of vitamin supplements for Dad's back, and a bouquet of tulips I knew Mom liked. The drive felt heavier than usual, like every turn in the road was asking me if I was really ready to let go. But I didn't stop. When I walked into the house, no one looked surprised to see me. That, somehow, hurt more than I expected. No, oh, you didn't have to. No, we missed you. Just Mom at the sink, Dad on the couch, Lily on her phone. I set the bags on the counter and started unpacking them. Salmon fillets, fresh greens, a loaf of good sourdough. As I was placing things in the fridge, Mom wiped her hands and turned to me, her voice sharp and too composed. Olivia, we need to talk. I froze, the carton of eggs still in my hand. About what? She crossed her arms. We already discussed this. What you've been sending isn't enough anymore. We're falling behind. My jaw clenched. Not enough? I repeated slowly. Dad stepped in, his voice low and serious. You make good money, Liv. You live alone. Meanwhile, we're scraping by. Doesn't that seem unfair to you? That word, unfair, hit me like a slap. I had covered the mortgage for nearly 2 years, paid utilities, prescriptions, car repairs, skipped holidays, delayed my home ownership dreams, cut my expenses to the bone. And somehow, I was the one being unfair? Before I could speak, Lily chimed in from the couch without even lifting her head. It's not like you're starving or anything. What's wrong with sharing a little? I turned to look at her, really look at her. The girl who never kept a job longer than 6 months. The artist who had been finding herself for the past 5 years. The woman who was now 28 and still had her groceries paid for by me. My voice came out quiet but cold. Sharing goes both ways, Lily. All you ever do is take. Mom's eyes narrowed. That's enough, Olivia. You're being disrespectful. I laughed, a single joyless sound. Disrespectful? I said. For finally speaking the truth? For telling you I'm exhausted? Her lips pressed into that familiar, judgmental line. The one she used when she wanted to shut down a conversation without actually listening. If it's such a burden, she said slowly, each word like a knife, then don't bother coming back. For a second, no one moved. The room held its breath. My fingers relaxed around the carton of eggs. I set them down carefully and looked at all 3 of them. Not in anger, but in recognition. This was who they were. And this was who I had become in their eyes. A resource, not a person. All right, I said, my voice flat but steady. If that's how you feel, then I hear you. Loud and clear. I didn't slam the door. I didn't throw anything. I just walked out with nothing but my coat and my car keys, the groceries still sitting unopened on the kitchen counter. No one followed me. No one called after me. Except for Lily's voice drifting behind me, half a mutter. So dramatic, the rain had started by then. Light, cold, persistent. It soaked through my jacket before I reached the car, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, the wetness didn't feel like weight. It felt like washing. I drove in silence. No music. No GPS, just the thrum of the engine and the empty road ahead. I didn't go back to my apartment right away. I stopped at a quiet gas station, parked under a flickering light, and just sat. My phone buzzed once. Dad's name. I didn't answer. I stared at the screen, then slowly opened my contacts and blocked 3 numbers. Mom, Dad, Lily. Not out of spite, but survival. Because I knew if I left that door open, even a crack, they'd pull me back in. And I couldn't afford to disappear into their needs anymore. 3 weeks passed. No calls, no texts, no late-night guilt messages. For the first time in years, my phone stayed quiet, and so did my mind. I got up early, made coffee in my own kitchen, opened the blinds to let in the morning light, and didn't flinch every time I heard a notification. I started going on evening walks around the neighborhood, stopped checking my bank app obsessively, and even signed up for a weekend pottery class I'd always wanted to try. It felt small, maybe even selfish, but it was mine, and for once that felt like enough. Then, just as I was beginning to believe they had accepted my silence, the message came. A short, clipped text from my mother. The bank sent another notice. Call us. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a full sentence, just a summons. And just like that, my stomach twisted, the old panic trying to climb its way back into my chest. I set the phone down without replying, but the question haunted me all night. Had they kept paying the mortgage? Had they done anything since I stopped? The next evening, after a day of mental back and forth, I opened my laptop and logged into the joint account I had used to transfer mortgage payments, the one in Dad's name. I had never checked it before. I'd trusted them. It was my family. Why wouldn't I? But what I found made the air leave my lungs. The last mortgage payment from that account had been almost 8 months ago, long before I stopped sending money. I stared at the transaction list, my eyes jumping between dates and dollar amounts, hoping I had read something wrong. But the screen didn't lie. For 3 more months after that final payment, I had continued to send over $1,000 monthly. That money hadn't gone toward the mortgage. It had gone somewhere else. I clicked over to my own banking app, pulling the records. Nearly $3,800 transferred after the last payment was made. Gone. No explanations, no updates, just silent withdrawals from my savings, dressed up as duty. My throat tightened. This wasn't just neglect, it was deception. The next morning, I called the bank directly. I explained that I had helped my parents with their mortgage, and I was concerned they might be in trouble. The woman on the other end, kind but distant, confirmed what I already suspected. The account hasn't received a full payment since January, she said. It's currently under special collections and at risk of foreclosure. I thanked her, hung up, and sat motionless at the kitchen table, my fingers pressed against my temples. My parents hadn't just failed to tell me the truth. They had let me keep paying, knowing the house was already slipping away. And the worst part? They never intended to explain. They were content to let me believe everything was fine while the foundation crumbled underneath me. I retraced the timeline in my head. The groceries I skipped, the nights I spent panicked over expenses, the apartment I never bought. And all that time, they had already given up on the house. I wasn't saving anything. I was just cushioning the fall so they wouldn't feel it as hard. I felt sick. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch with a blanket over my legs, the room dark except for the glow of my laptop. I opened Lily's Instagram page, something I hadn't done in months. She had posted a photo 2 weeks ago, her at a beach resort with the caption, "Needed a break from the chaos. Healing weekend." The resort, I recognized, was in Michigan, a place Mom once mentioned wanting to visit. I clicked through the photos. Spa day, cocktails, boutique shopping. And there she was, Mom in the background of one picture, holding a smoothie. I closed the laptop. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. Theft of my trust, my money, my peace. I thought about calling them, about demanding answers, about yelling, crying, confronting them with the truth. But what would be the point? If they had lied once, they would lie again. And this time, I didn't want apologies. I wanted clarity. I picked up my phone and opened my messages. My fingers hovered over the screen as I typed, then deleted, then typed again. Finally, I sent one sentence to Dad. "I just spoke to the bank. They haven't received a payment in 8 months. I kept sending money. Where did it go?" No reply. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. And finally, the phone rang. Dad didn't answer at first. I watched the phone buzz in my hand, his name flashing across the screen like a warning sign. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strange mix of fury and finality. I let it ring until it stopped. Then it rang. Again. I answered on the third try, holding the phone just far enough from my face as if the physical distance might soften whatever was about to happen. "Olivia," Dad said, his voice low and cautious. "I guess you found out." I didn't speak. Right away. I wanted to see if he'd offer the truth before I asked. He didn't. "I didn't just find out," I said evenly. "I confirmed it. The mortgage is 8 months overdue. I sent money for 3 of those months. Where did it go?" There was a long pause, the kind that used to make me uncomfortable enough to fill the silence. But not anymore. "I know you're angry," he finally said. "But it's not what you think." I let out a bitter, breathless laugh. "Not what I think? I sent thousands of dollars to save that house. You didn't use it, and you didn't tell me. What part of that am I misunderstanding?" That's when Mom grabbed the phone. I could hear the sound of her voice before she even started speaking clearly. "Don't talk to your father like that," she snapped. "You don't understand everything that's happened." I leaned forward on the kitchen counter, my grip tightening. "Then explain it to me. Tell me why you let me keep paying when you knew it wouldn't make a difference." Her voice trembled, not with guilt, but indignation. "We were going through a lot. You have no idea the pressure we've been under. Lily lost her job, your father's back has been acting up again, and the house—" She stopped, then changed course. "It's falling apart. Everything's been falling apart since you left." "No," I said, sharper now. "Everything started falling apart when I stopped paying for your decisions. I didn't walk away, Mom. I was pushed." "You're being cruel," she said, her voice rising. "We're your parents. We needed help. We still do. You can't just turn your back on family." My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "I didn't turn my back. I just stopped being your personal bank account." There was silence, thick and weighted. Then Lily's voice cut through. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," she said casually, like we were arguing over a group dinner bill. "It was just a few months. You act like the world owes you something." I nearly dropped the phone. "The world doesn't. But maybe this family does. After 10 years of paying everyone's bills, I thought I at least deserved honesty." Lily scoffed. "You've changed." I breathed in through my nose, long and slow. "No, I've stopped pretending that being used was love." Dad came back, on the line, his voice suddenly softer, tired. "We messed up, okay? But we didn't mean to. We're sorry. We'll pay you back." I stared at the wall in front of me, a small crack above the sink that I had never noticed until now. "You've said that before?" "I mean it this time," he said, almost pleading. "But if you don't help, we could lose everything." And then, the sentence that finally broke whatever was left. "You're our only hope, Liv." I took a deep breath, then spoke slowly. "If that's true, then maybe it's time you stopped hoping and started doing." There was a stunned silence, like I'd shattered something sacred. Mom's voice cracked. "You can't mean that." But I did, and I think they knew it. "I've carried this family for over a decade," I said, every word sharp as glass. "While Lily made excuses and you ignored reality, I worked, I paid. I gave up everything I wanted to keep you afloat. And the moment I stopped, you didn't ask if I was okay. You demanded more." I could hear them both breathing, heavy and uneven, but I didn't stop. "So no," I said quietly. "I'm not coming back. I'm done." And with that, I hung up. Not in anger, in peace. The silence that followed that final call was the kind that fills a room, not with emptiness, but with something close to peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for another request, another guilt-laced favor disguised as a family emergency. I turned off my phone for 3 full days and placed it in a drawer, like locking away a voice I no longer needed to hear. And in its absence, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I lived. Not for them. For me, I moved into a new apartment 2 weeks later. It wasn't much. just a small third-floor walk-up with creaky wooden floors and a chipped windowsill that overlooked a quiet courtyard. But to me, it felt like the first real place I had ever called mine. No one knocking on my door asking for rides to appointments. No one dropping off unpaid bills. No one looking at me like I owed them a life I never agreed to provide. Each morning became a ritual of reclaiming myself. I brewed my own coffee, not rushing out the door to get to someone else's problem. I stretched in the soft morning light, opened the window, and listened to birds instead of complaints. I walked to the park without keeping one ear open for my phone, without checking in on a sister who never once checked in on me. I started sketching again, just for fun, the kind of quiet joy I'd forgotten I could have. Money, slowly, stopped being a source of dread. I canceled the auto payments. I stopped sending birthday cash or holiday help. My savings didn't grow fast, but it stabilized, like a heartbeat coming back into rhythm after years of stress. I took a hard look at my expenses, restructured my budget, and began setting aside small amounts each week towards something I wanted for the first time in forever. Not a house for them, but a future for me. But even peace, I learned, has its price. Because while the noise of their needs faded, something else crept in: doubt. Guilt doesn't always come with a phone call. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet. At night, after a long day at work, I'd lie in bed and wonder, what if the house really is falling apart? What if they lose it and have nowhere to go? What if one day I get a call that something happened to Dad and I wasn't there to help? Then came the letter. Not a text, not a voicemail, but an actual envelope slipped under my apartment door. No return address, just my name in shaky handwriting. I knew it was from Lily before I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Mom's health is worse. The bank is moving forward. If you let the house go, you'll regret it when she's gone. No greeting, no apology, just that. A final twist of the knife. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I folded the paper in half, walked to the kitchen, and lit a match over the sink. As it burned, I felt the last string that tethered me to that house snap. Quietly, completely. I knew what that letter was. Not concern, not desperation. It was a weapon. A last attempt to manipulate me through the one thing they always knew worked: my empathy. But this time, I didn't let it in. I had learned something in the stillness. Empathy without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. And I had surrendered. Long enough. I poured myself a cup of tea, curled up on my couch with a book, and let the light from my lamp cast warmth over the room. It was a quiet evening. There were no emergencies, no buzzing phones, no sudden requests. Just breath, just space, just me. And for the first time, I didn't feel selfish for choosing that. I felt free. Freedom, I quickly learned, is rarely loud. It doesn't come in grand declarations or victorious parades. It comes in the soft moments, the absence of dread when checking your phone, the quiet confidence of saying no without apology, the slow but certain return of your own voice after years of being spoken over. And yet, even in the calm, I sometimes found myself wondering, was I too harsh? Had I closed the door too completely? There were nights I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the last conversation with my parents, my mother's sharp words, my father's tired promises, Lily's indifference laced with entitlement. And still, the guilt would try to sneak in like a cold draft under the door. Because when you've been conditioned your entire life to feel responsible for everyone else's survival, choosing yourself can feel like a betrayal. But every time I questioned my decision, something would ground me again. A receipt from the past, a bank statement, an email thread with polite demands, a canceled therapy appointment because I was too busy wiring funds, a memory of walking into that house with groceries, only to be told it wasn't enough. I wasn't the villain in this story. I was just the first one to stop pretending everything was fine. Still, it took time to rebuild the parts of myself I had given away so freely. I didn't bounce back overnight. I didn't suddenly feel healed or whole. I had to learn how to enjoy things without guilt, how to rest without feeling lazy, how to spend money on myself without hearing Lily's voice in the back of my head, asking, "Can you cover this for me just this once?" Sometimes I missed the idea of family, the idealized version I held onto for so long. The one where love was mutual, where help was balanced, where sacrifice wasn't one-sided. But that version had never existed in my reality. I had been trying to build a healthy family dynamic by myself, hoping they'd eventually meet me in the middle. They never did, and slowly I stopped hoping. I began putting together a life I hadn't dared to imagine before. I started traveling, not far, just weekend getaways to places I liked. I joined a local book club. I signed up for a language class I'd always been curious about. I even adopted a dog from the shelter. His name is Milo, and the way he curls up next to me without needing anything but presence reminds me that love doesn't have to come with debt. There were still difficult moments. Messages from unknown numbers. Voicemails I deleted without listening. A birthday card from my mother signed with just her name and no words inside. I kept every piece, not out of sentiment but as reminders of where I'd been and why I could never go back. I once thought being strong meant holding everyone else up, that the more I carried, the more I proved I was worthy. But now I understand that real strength is knowing when to put something down and walk away, especially when it's breaking you. By choosing myself, I didn't abandon them. I just stopped abandoning me. And no matter how many letters they send or memories they try to resurrect, I've made peace with one simple truth. I am not responsible for the consequences of their choices. I am only responsible for my own healing. That's the price of peace, not absence of pain, but the refusal to let pain write your story anymore. And finally, after all these years, I'm the one holding the pen. What Olivia lived through is something far too many people quietly endure. Emotional labor masked as loyalty, and financial exploitation disguised as family duty. As a licensed therapist and family systems specialist, I can tell you, this is not just dysfunction. It's a trauma pattern. When one member of a family becomes the fixer, they are often rewarded with expectation, not appreciation. And the longer that pattern goes unchallenged, the more it becomes normalized. Olivia didn't walk away because she stopped caring. She walked away because she started healing. And healing sometimes looks like distance, like blocking a number, like saying no without guilt, like rebuilding your self-worth without permission. If you've ever been made to feel selfish for setting boundaries, remember this. Healthy love respects limits. It doesn't punish you for protecting your peace. What do you think? Was Olivia right to walk away, or should she have given them one last chance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your story could help someone else find the strength to stand up for themselves too. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear that choosing yourself is never the wrong choice.